We've been hosting political forums every election year for at least 15 years. It started back with Charles Stern, was county clerk, longtime club member. In recent years, the three media outlets serving McMinnville and Yamhill County have teamed up to sponsor it. KLYC, represented by Dave Adams, the owner. He's back there with all that electronic equipment. He's live streaming this on the internet, as well as doing whatever he chooses to do over the air on the radio. And we've got Jerry Eichten, longtime coin journalist, who's now heading up McMinnville Community Media as our local access television outlet. And he'll be video recording the proceedings for rebroadcast on channels 11 and 27 on the local Comcast and Frontier outlets. John Gray, retired Yamhill County Legal Counsel, is serving as our moderator. He will be leading questioning, but we will take questions from members of the audience out here. I put some index cards on all of the tables. You can write out a question, kind of try to flag my attention. I'll be looking around periodically at tables for hands to go up. I will collect those and feed them to John. He can work them into the lineup as he sees fit and mix them in with his questions. And Eric Wright is doing our timekeeping right here, and he's going to kind of flash the signals. We're allowing 2 minutes for opening, 2 minutes for closing, 2 minutes for each question. Candidates will alternate. We each get a chance to answer each question, respond to each question. Jim Thompson, the independent candidate, won the coin toss. Will go first. Mike Neerman is the incumbent in the House district. He's a Republican, and he will go second. There's no Democratic candidate in this race, and the district laps up to the southern edge of McMinnville city limits. It does take in Dayton, Amity, and Willamina, and some of other rural territory in Yamhill County. And these gentlemen are both from Dallas and Polk County, which is kind of the heart of the district. I think that's all I have. So if the candidates want to come up here, we've got a couple chairs for you. And Jim, if you want to take the podium first here, you can provide your opening statement, followed by Mike.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate all you people coming out in the first terrible weather we've had this year to be here for lunch. I grew up in Lincoln City on a farm outside of Lincoln City, came to the district in 1965 to go to college, and I haven't left. My job has taken me all over the country through my career, but always came back to this area. I've been in the legislature for 3 terms in the past, and I served on healthcare, ag and natural resources, and the business and labor committees as the primary responsibilities. This time I'm running as an independent. I've been very open. I am a moderate business Republican running as an independent. I have the Democrat Party write-in nomination for this district. So I don't know what that is, but you can figure it out. I'm running to bring things back together. We have become very divided in politics in this country and in this state, and we have to stop it. I grew up in the era of McCall and Hatfield. I knew both of them because they were friends of my father, and it's very different now from when it was then. I want to see the legislature be the people's board of directors. I don't think you send people down there to spend most of their time throwing mud balls at each other. It's a matter of we got to get things done. So my specialty is in healthcare. My career was in asthma and allergy treatment, and so I have a lot of background there. My basic vision is we've got to provide more health care for more people at less cost. And I think we're doing that on a sliding into scale. It's going to take a while to realize that, but we're making making some headway. The big issue left that I specialize in, I see a zero in front of me, is access to health care. We'll probably talk about more about that later. Thank you.
Hi, thanks everybody for having me, and thanks for putting this on. I'm Mike Neerman. I'm the state representative from House District 23, and so one thing that's unique that I bring to the legislature is I'm a software engineer by trade. We don't have very many software engineers in the legislature. As a matter of fact, I'm the only one. And people say, hey, how come we don't have very many software engineers in the legislature? And I'll tell you why. Is because generally we don't have enough social skills to actually get elected to public office. So that's what I bring to the legislature. One other thing that I bring to the legislature is an eye for fiscal responsibility. I think there's a different problem with state government. I think the problem with state government is we've had one-party rule for about 30 years now, and nobody's watching the ship, and the only golf club they have in their bag is more money and raise taxes, and that's what Measure 97 is all about. Is it's broken, it's the wheels are off the cart. We need more money. Give us more money. Give us the biggest tax increase in the history of the state of Oregon, and so that's what I spend my time working on. A lot of these agencies are run amok. You know, you hear stories about the Energy Department and DHS and healthcare. You know, we spent $300 million on a website that never saw the light of day, and so that's what I focus my time and my energy on. I'm glad to be your representative for House District 23.
Mike, stay up there. I'm glad you did. You get the first question. Last month, Governor Brown announced a settlement in the state's lawsuit against the software giant Oracle for its performance in attempting to help Oregon implement Obamacare through Cover Oregon. Was the settlement good for Oregon taxpayers? Why or why not?
So that's a good question, and that's on the table right now. And this whole thing is a bunch of garbage. Oracle's a fine company. They provide software services to companies all across the globe and everything. What the problem was they wrote a time and materials contract with Oracle, and Oracle did what they did. They sent competent people, and they wrote software, and they gave it to them, and there was no requirements on the job, and there was no nothing. That's why it was a time and materials contract and not a deliverables contract. That was the problem with it. Then the problem got worse when the website wasn't delivered, and the governor, the ex-governor now, had to kind of cover his behind on that, and so the big lawsuit with Oracle. Lo and behold, we get a settlement out of it finally. Does that surprise anybody that that's how it turned out? So now the state of Oregon has a bunch of Oracle coupons that we can spend doing business with Oracle, which we were going to do anyway. With Oracle's all over state government right now, and which is fine. And so that's what happened there. It was a long exercise where, not to pick on lawyers, but where a lot of lawyers made a lot of money and a lot of taxpayers paid a lot of money, and we didn't get anything for it. We didn't get any value for it. We spent $300 million on that website. I don't know the exact final count on how much we spent on the lawsuit, but it was pretty pricey, and we have nothing to show for it. Nothing. We need to stop doing that. We need to spend our money on services. So yeah, it was a bad thing.
Jim, was the settlement good for Oregon taxpayers? Why or why not?
It wasn't a good settlement from the standpoint we didn't get anything out of it. Mike's right. We got a whole lot of coupons from Oracle that we can spend down the road. They got additional business from Oregon out of it, and we got up from under a political nightmare. These kinds of lawsuits seldom are good for Oregon. We've gone through them on PERS and several other things, because the people who really make the money on it are the attorneys on both sides. The longer you can drag the lawsuit out, the more money is made in servicing the lawsuit, not solving the problem. And this is one of those cases where it was a good idea to bring it to a halt because it was going to continue for potentially years, because it wasn't really clear that either side had full responsibility. It was real clear, however, to me that Oracle did what they were asked to do. I was at many of those board meetings when the Cover Oregon people would say, hey, I've got this great idea for some new bell and whistle we can put in the program. And then they'd turn to Oracle and say, can you do that? Oracle's on a time and materials budget. Of course they could do it. You pay me enough money, I can do it. And whatnot. So they say, yeah, we'll turn our people loose on it and see what we can do, and then we'll send you the bill. And they kept doing it until the system overbuilt itself and collapsed under its own weight. I wasn't surprised that Cover Oregon collapsed of the way it was being built, and I wasn't surprised that this Oracle thing came about the way it did. But it was good for Oregon from the standpoint we don't have a lawsuit anymore. It was bad for Oregon from the standpoint we didn't get anything out of it. We just brought it to an end. It's sort of stalemate sort of situation. So.
Thanks, Jim. You get the next question. We're going to alternate. You'll be confused. You'll be confused for about 4 questions.
Yeah.
What is the most important land use issue that should be addressed by the next legislature, and how should it be addressed?
I think we need to look at flexibility. And that isn't going through and tearing down the land use system, but we have to be aware of the fact that the economy worldwide is changing. And with those changes come new and different opportunities that we have to be ready for. A lot of people are still waiting for the timber industry to come back. Number one, it's not going to come back soon. Number two, it's not going to come back the way it was. If you don't believe that, go out and visit the Hampton Mill in Willamina. You'll see a lot of guys in very clean white shirts going up into air-conditioned cubicles hung from the ceiling, running a sawmill. When my dad worked in a sawmill, you actually got dirty in a sawmill. That doesn't happen anymore. So the labor force will be much reduced. It's much more mechanized and very, very computerized. What we need to do is look at each of our communities and say, what does that community need and want? This isn't top down. There's no solution at the state level that I have any faith in. And then when you look at the possibilities for our individual communities, especially the smaller ones in rural Oregon, how do we help them achieve that? I used to do this work with Bayer Corporation, landing pharmaceutical plants, vitamin manufacturing plants, all kinds of things in communities. And the way in which that works best is if the community is prepared, welcoming, they have zoning for a plant, not necessarily yours. But you don't walk into a community with $200 million in your pocket and ask the question, do you have any land anywhere near that you can zone for a plant? No way, that doesn't happen. You're out of town in a minute. We're either ready for the development that comes our way, and we've made the zoning and land use changes to accommodate it, or it's not coming our way. It's as simple as that. And we need flexibility.
So Mike, do you want the question again? What is the most important land use issue that should be addressed by the next legislature, and how should it be addressed?
Good. This is a great question. So I've had conversations with the Speaker of the House, Tina Kotek, on this. And one of her big issues is the high cost of affordable housing. I don't know if that's like a double negative or whatever, but that's one of her big issues. And I'm saying to her all the time, you know, there's been, since 1974, when we started with Senate Bill 100, when we started this land use process, there's been only one city in the state of Oregon that's ever increased its urban growth boundary. There you go. That's a great trivia question, don't you think? It's Redmond. That's the only city that's ever increased it. Because every city that's tried to increase it gets bogged down in lawsuits by these environmentalists and all that. And then, I mean, it's not the only cause, but then you wonder why we have unaffordable housing in all the urban areas like that. So we need to loosen up the chokehold on that, and we need to find a way to get some of these areas into households. I'm all for preserving farmland. You know, if you drive north on I-5, you know, you see land that's in Oregon that's great farmland, and it's being used for its best purpose. You know, and you see little signs up that say, you know, grass or hay or hazelnuts or whatever, all that. When you get to Washington, which doesn't have the same land use laws there, you see used car lots and scraggly unused areas and all that kind of stuff. So they don't have the land use areas that we do, but or the land use laws that we do. But when they first zoned Oregon back in 1974, they zoned a lot of places exclusive farm and forest that aren't ever going to be farmed, that aren't ever going to be forest, and we need to turn those into usable parcels of land so we can keep the cost of housing down. This isn't something that costs government any money or anything like that. It just makes the land available to builders. So that's the thing that we need to do. That's a specific idea.
Next question is yours, Mike. Is it the state's responsibility to make sure there is a minimum level of law enforcement in counties that relied on timber revenues in the past? Or is it purely a local question of whether the voters are willing to pay for a minimum level of law enforcement with property tax dollars?
So that's a good question, and we faced that very issue in Polk County, where we didn't have adequate law enforcement resources for a long time, and they blamed it on timber. But in answer to your question, first of all, is I would say no, it's not the state's responsibility to provide local law enforcement. It's a state's responsibility to provide a state police force that does the tasks that a state police force does. But it's the county's responsibility to provide for a county sheriff and all that. They need to do that through their funds. At least in Polk County, that's the biggest line item in the county budget of discretionary budget is the county sheriff there. So that's very important. Arguably, that's the first job that government should do, is provide for security of its citizens. So that's very important. I get upset when these counties, they decide they want to provide for their own bureaucracy. Did you know that the county manager in Polk County gets paid $138,000 a year? Did you know that if you took him and you pink slipped him, you could provide for 2 sheriff's deputies almost perfectly with just the salary and benefits that guy's provided? They have a community development director in Polk County that gets paid $120,000 a year. I don't make that kind of money. I mean, these are county bureaucrats, and on down the thing. That's where the money's going. And so I was kind of disappointed in Polk County, where we had a public safety levy, and I was kind of disappointed that they called it a public safety levy. What I think we need to do is we need to spend our county funds, our precious county funds, on law enforcement first and infrastructure second, those kinds of things. And then if we run out of money, we can have a levy we can put on the ballot that's a bureaucratic administration levy and see if that passes.
Do you want the whole question, Jim?
Go ahead.
Okay. Is it the state's responsibility to make sure there is a minimum level of law enforcement in counties that relied on timber revenues in the past, or is it purely a local question of whether the voters are willing to pay for a minimum level of law enforcement with property tax dollars?
It is not the state's responsibility to provide local law enforcement. And I say that from a standpoint, not only it's not a good idea policy-wise, it's not a good idea cost-wise, because the state doesn't have any money either for doing that sort of thing, so it's going to come out of somebody's taxes somewhere. One of the problems we face with a lot of these local issues is we need more people involved in the local. There's always a cadre of people looking for someone else to step up and pay the bill. No, law enforcement in our community is our responsibility, and we better figure out how to do it. And that's true of all the rest of local government. You have no access to, you have no better access to any government than you have at the local level, and yet I find most people know the least about local government. Mike brings up the issue of salary levels. Salary levels are generally based on competitive rates between a variety of similar jobs. I don't know in every county if those are excessive or not. You'd have to go and do the work to compare them. But one of the big issues that we do face if we don't accept the responsibility for law enforcement is the state police will back us up, but they can't do it. And one of the issues that came up in our county when we did not have law enforcement or our county deputies between noon and or 10 o'clock one night, noon the next day, was you get an ambulance run out in the country that where one's involved in a wife beating or something like that. The ambulance will go out there. As soon as they find out it has to do with an assault, they back off 1 mile and park. Nothing happens until law enforcement gets there. And the state police, in the case I'm referring to, are 45 minutes away. A lot can happen medically when you don't have law enforcement on site to stabilize things. So again, it's a local responsibility. There is no capacity for the state to do it.
Thanks, Jim. One more time, this is yours. Like I said, 4 questions.
About the time we get through with this, I'll get the pattern down.
This is 4 questions. You'll know how to do it next time. In a few weeks, the voters consider Measure 97. The initiative measure increases the corporate minimum tax for corporations with at least $25 million in Oregon sales. Revenues generated from the increase would be used to fund education, health care, and services for senior citizens. Should the voters pass Measure 97? Why or why not?
Well, first of all, that is an initiative petition, and I'm a big supporter of people's initiative right to petition their government. So that part's a done deal. I don't think it's a good idea in this particular case because they're asking for too much money with no budget, no controls, and no plan. We've listed in there 3 issues that we will cover with that money. In fact, there is no formula in there that allocates any money to those 3 functions. All the money could go to one of them, for instance. So that's the first issue. The second issue that has come up is that we have a constitutional control in this state that all taxes levied on fuels have to go to transportation. So any of this Measure 97 money that's coming off fuel companies is going to go into the transportation fund. Now, I'm not opposed to that, but it's just going to change the dynamic on the thing. The other thing that bothers me is, having been in the legislature, the last thing I want to see is someone coming through the doors with wheelbarrows full of money. There's no budget, there's no plan, and there'll be a feeding frenzy. And when you've got $6 billion on the table, anybody that has any power in politics can figure out a way to walk out the back door with $1 million of that for some pet project in their district. Who's going to miss $1 million authorized out of $6 billion? So you're going to get this Mickey Mouse thing. The other thing that goes on is there's no control on how that's levied. I can put 1/3 of that money into education and everybody's going to feel good about it. Then somebody else goes around the back door and pulls money out of education from other sources. You could end up with very little increase in the budget for education because the money's been sideslipped into something else. So I think we have to be very, very careful. And this is not practicable the way it is. The legislature is going to have to do a great deal of work on this if it passes.
Mike, should the voters pass Measure 97? Why or why not?
So, no, the voters shouldn't pass Measure 97, and thankfully I've heard some polling that it's down in the polls, so I'm glad about that. So this is the worst possible thing that we could do. And again, this is the result of one-party rule in Oregon, and they're the party that likes to write checks, and so they run out of money. And so when they run out of money, they go after everybody else's wallet. And this is sold as, oh, it's all just the big corporations and all that kind of stuff. Corporations that have over $25 million in gross sales. So one corporation in Oregon that has just about exactly $25 million in gross sales annually is Wilco Farm Stores. There's one in McMinnville here. So that doesn't strike me as like the big mega corporation or anything like that, but they're on the verge of being impacted by this. And it's gonna wipe them out. And remember, this is a tax not on profits, not on earnings. This is a tax on gross sales. So just whatever comes in the door. If you're a low margin business, this is gonna wipe you out or whatever. And if you're gonna have to pass it on to your customers, whatever. So the other problem with this is, whenever I go and talk to people about what problems we have in Oregon, one problem that always comes up is PERS. Where we can't really do that much about PERS. We're kind of handcuffed. The courts have finally just said, no, you can't do anything about it. And part of that's a good thing because we have to honor a contract, whatever. But, What this does is this increases the size of government by 30%. I mean, this isn't a small bite. This isn't a small increase. This isn't a Band-Aid. This is a huge, lengthy hospital stay for the state of Oregon. And we don't need to do that. There's places that we can cut. We have the Department of Energy is making all kinds of loans that they don't get back. We have other agencies. ODOT is kind of a little bit of a bloated agency. We have all sorts of places where we can cut. So we need to look to that first, and then we can talk about raising taxes. But no, I'm a no on 97.
Okay, you get the next question, and it's appropriate since you mentioned PERS. The 2013 legislature made a number of changes to the public employee retirement system to control rate increases for state and local governments. The 2015 Oregon Supreme Court case invalidated one of the key changes, resulting in large increases for new rates. As a legislator, how would you address the budget crisis affecting the state and many cities, counties, and school districts from PERS rate increases?
So there's a kind of a simple way to address this, and it's kind of drastic, but it's kind of simple, is if you don't have any public employees, you don't have any public employee costs, you don't have any PERS costs. So I think that from top to bottom, we need to do things, for instance, like what I just said about Measure 97. We don't need to grow the number of public employees. We need to shrink the number of public employees, and we can do that by contracting work out. And if you contract work out, you can contract it out to private employers who don't have to pay PERS, and so that's an answer for, I think, many jurisdictions can do that. I think that you mentioned school districts. School districts is one where they can turn it over to charter schools and private schools and not have public employees doing the work there and sidestep the PERS costs that way. So that's one thing that we can do there. Other than that, the courts have really tied our hands on that. We have it almost solved right now, where it's kind of a defined contribution plan right now for PERS Tier 3 retirees, rather than a defined benefit plan. So we kind of have it so that it's contained going forward, almost. But that's the only solution that we really have, is to reduce the number of public employees.
Jim, as a legislator, how would you address the budget crisis affecting the state and many cities, counties, and school districts from PERS rate increases?
Well, most of the problem with PERS and the subject of the lawsuit that we recently lost, again, for I think the fourth time, has to do not with PERS in general, and Mike alluded to that. It has to do with Tier 1 PERS. The $1.5 billion is mostly money owed to people who have retired on PERS 1. So let's Tier 1. So let's take just a look at that, why that happened. That was an overly generous program that was set up for a reason back in the 1970s. We were running inflation at 12-13% a year, and we were giving public employees, begging public employees to accept a 2% raise. The argument at the time was, we'll make it up with your retirement and make you whole by passing a better retirement plan for you when you get there. And that part worked. Unfortunately, what didn't work is many of those employees in the 1980s got reasonable salary increases. So it wasn't a career-long situation, but the contract was already in place. Since that time, the last several sessions of the legislature, numerous changes have made in PERS so that it is a reasonable, sustainable program. But quite frankly, we've got that PERS 1 problem, according to the courts, until all of these people literally die off. And then the bloat will go down. But and there is no solution. We're going to pay it. So we have to find a source of revenue, and don't think it's going to be 97 on the face of it, because 97 didn't address the PERS issue. So we still have to find a way to find that funding.
Thanks, Jim. This one's yours. Some people criticize the Oregon tax system as unfair. This is a two-part question. First, are there any changes to the state tax code that would improve our income tax system? Second, should the voters be asked to consider a statewide sales tax?
You mean, should the voters be again asked to consider? I'll put that on an initiative along with the pump your own gas piece, because I think it's a cultural issue. So I'm going to take that part first. We can ask the voters to approve a sales tax, or they can produce an initiative for a sales tax. And either way, you have to get a majority of the voters to approve it, or it's not going to happen. I'm smiling a little bit because I don't think it's going to happen. We've been down that road a lot. So that leaves us then with the fact that we are an income tax state. We can come up with different ways, mechanisms to collect money to pay for things, but it all comes back to the same. It's taxes. So, I can tax you on Measure 97, and then you can roll it downhill in your prices, and I'll pay for it. That is effectively a sales tax that is not a good sales tax because of the tax on sales part at the top. But no, there's nothing that we're going to do that makes any difference. We have to reduce expenses where we can, and we have to realize the fact we are an income tax state. There aren't other tax mechanisms to pick up the slack. And, we're talking about more money for schools, more money for highways, more money for this, more money for that. That money comes from you, ladies and gentlemen. There isn't any bank we can rob. It's a reality of life. So, yeah, we can tinker with the tax system. We can make it more fair here and there. We can change the schedules. But it all comes down to the tax money coming in has to equal the money being spent. If you want drastic cuts in state services, we can reduce your taxes. However, every time we make a move on that, there's howls from all over the place because there's a constituency for every dumb thing we do in Oregon. And those people come out smoking when we talk about let's reduce this or let's eliminate this or, let's cut out any aid to community libraries to save money. Whoa, everybody who reads a book comes storming out of the woodwork. So there are no easy answers on taxes.
Thanks, Mike. Two-part question. First part, are there changes to the state tax code that would improve the income tax system? Second part, should the voters be asked to consider, again, a statewide sales tax?
So, in Oregon, we have just kind of a two-legged stool there, which is a good thing. The citizens of the state of Oregon have decided that we don't want a sales tax. What was it? It's 9 times or something like that. We voted that one down. With Measure 97, some people would say that that's a sales tax. So this will be the 10th time we're voting it down. So it's a tax on retail activity. So it's essentially a sales tax that'll be passed on. So I don't think that's a wise thing. I wish I could change the conversation. I wish I could put it in a light of rather than how do we monkey with the tax system to squeeze more money out of the people or anything like that, let's monkey with how we run government to make it more lean and make it deliver services more effectively. So I wish we could have that conversation, and it seems like we don't really get that conversation. Right now, the Democrats that are in control, they just go from spending project to spending project to spending project. You look at these, some of them are not huge dollar amounts, but there's enough of them that are huge dollar amounts. I mentioned $300 million on a website that never saw the light of day. We spent $180 million on a bridge where no shovel ever touched the ground to build that bridge. We build affordable housing for it's $237 a square foot. That's Bill Gates mansion style thing. So if you want a creative proposal for income tax, and I haven't really heard much about creative proposals to do the income tax, how about this? How about everybody on their first X number of dollars, maybe let's say the first $500 that you make, everybody pays the top marginal rate. That way everybody has skin in the game. How about that? So if you want to tax the rich or something like that, then everybody's going to pay that amount on the first 500 or 1,000 they make every year for a proposal to monkey with the income tax.
Thanks, Mike. This one is yours, and this will be the last question today, and then after the question, we'll have the closing statements with Jim going first on the closing statements. State law that established sentencing guidelines and mandatory minimum sentences limits the discretion of circuit court judges in sentencing persons who've been convicted of committing crimes. Should circuit court judges have greater discretion in sentencing, or are the current laws regarding sentencing guidelines and mandatory minimum sentences about right?
So, and what you're talking about there is Measure 11, and we've had some little tinkers and fix to Measure 11. What caused Measure 11, it was the outrage of citizens that judges were letting these people go that were terrible criminals, whatever, and then they would go out and reoffend. And people got fed up with that, and they said, no, from now on, if you commit a crime, then you have to do the time. And I think that's appropriate. Now, I'm open-minded to if you have little incremental fixes, that if there's specific problems with what goes on with Measure 11, you have a situation where the 18-year-old boy is sleeping with his 16-year-old girlfriend or something like that, and the dad of the girl gets wind of that, and then he has to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life or something like that. So you have some odd situations like that, and I'm willing to look at those, and we can fix those on a case-by-case basis. But for the most part, I'm for Measure 11, is we need to do that. When people do the crime, they have to do the time, you know. The problem we have with Measure 11 now is we have district attorneys that know that there's Measure 11 crimes, and so they plea bargain under it to try to get out of it. So, but I'm a fan of Measure 11. I stand with the citizens of Oregon that put that into law. So.
Thanks, Don. Jim, you will answer this question, and then you'll have your 2 minutes for your closing statement. Should circuit court judges have greater discretion in sentencing, or are the current laws regarding sentencing guidelines and mandatory minimum sentences about right?
Well, first of all, you have to look at the system in a broader sense and how we got here. And the issues that come up are the pendulum swinging between people who want criminals hung and people on the other side who don't want to pay for jails. So every time the crime gets so far out of control that everybody gets upset, we want stiffer penalties, and we put in Measure 11 type issues, which I tend to support that, with the caveat that I think there are changes we can make where it's clearly misused. But now we're looking at another system. We have too many people in prison, too many people in jail, and nobody wants to pay for them. Okay, let's reduce the sentences and get these people back out on the street. I would look at things like the number of people we have in jail on drug offenses involving their use of drugs. You know, I would rather put them in rehabilitation. However, there aren't very many of those people. If you talk to the county sheriff and the prison people, most of the people in there have drug offenses. They're selling them, and they're selling them to high school kids and whatnot. The public doesn't want those people back on the street, but they don't want to pay for them either. So we as a society have to take a real close look at what we're willing to do with government. What do we want to pay for, and what do we want to put up with? Because we can loosen up court sentences a whole lot, and we can have a ton of people released back on the street. Do you want them released back on your street? And that's the issue, because it's always someplace else, but no, it's here. And it's the issue that we have on a whole bunch of things that are happening right now. What does the public want? What will they tolerate? And what are they willing to do about things? It's easy to blame the legislature. It's easy to blame the city council. But folks, we are the legislature and the city council and everything in between. So, you know, look in the mirror. Yeah.
Thank you. Now you have 2 minutes, Jim, for your closing statement. After you finish, Mike will have 2 minutes.
Well, I don't think it takes rocket scientists to look around right now and see politics in upheaval. If you watch the nightly news starting at the presidential level, it's become interesting at least. The confidence people have in government is at an all-time low. The confidence people have in politicians in government is at an all-time low. And again, that reflects the population. Mike refers to the Democratic Party control of the legislature. They didn't put themselves there. We did. And that's the way it is until we decide we want to do something different with a big enough majority to make that happen. So the public is really responsible for the issues that we have to put up with. My interest is to stop the nonsense. I look at the legislature as the people's board of directors. You elect people and you're paying for them to go to Salem and solve the state's problems on your behalf. And I think way too much time is spent on partisan division, rock throwing, front page news about who did what to whoever yesterday in a political way. I don't care about any of that. I've been on boards of directors, and the job is to get together and get things done. On corporate boards of directors, nobody comes in and says who are the Democrats and who are the Republicans. Nobody cares. You can probably figure it out after a while, but that's not what they're there for. And I think we have to refocus government into being a business. The largest corporation in the state of Oregon is the state of Oregon in terms of assets under management and things like that. Now we should start behaving like it. And frankly, if the Nike board of directors behaved like the legislature does, you'd probably go down there with a broad axe and take them out too. We've got to stop the nonsense and get back to work.
Thanks. 2 minutes, Mike.
Good, thanks. So thanks again, everybody, for having me. This is a great forum. This is what makes America great, is your elected officials coming up here and answering to the people. But I'll say some things to make some contrast between myself and my opponent here. So we talk about PERS, and his household is PERS Tier 1 retiree-funded household. I took a pledge in my last campaign 2 years ago that I would accept no retirement money whatsoever from the state based on my services in the legislature. So I accept no retirement money from the state. My opponent was the treasurer for a committee to raise property taxes in the city of Dallas, and so I'm pretty. I fought against that campaign. So I stand pretty hard that the problems in Oregon aren't that taxes aren't high enough. That's not what our problem is. So I think there's some good contrasts between my opponent and myself. I think that we've had 30 years of one-party rule, and we need somebody in there that can stand up to these people. And I don't think the problem is that we're not cutting enough deals with the Democrats or anything like that. I think the problem is that nobody's standing up to them. I'm on the oversight committee for the DMV. They're putting in a new computer system at the DMV. It's a $90 million project, and I'm very unhappy with some of the ways that it's going right now. And I'm letting them know, and when I let them know and they don't respond, and now just lately I'm starting to go to the media on them and everything. My opponent was on the oversight committee for Cover Oregon, and we all know how that turned out. So I agree with him that you get the government that you want, you get the government that you vote for, and in the end you get the government that you deserve. So anyway, that's who I am, and that's what you get.
All right. Thank you both very much. Appreciate it. Now I'll turn it over to Steve.
Well, I made one omission to start with, that we have 3 media partners, and I managed to omit the News Register, represented here by Tom Henderson. And secondly, I want to just mention that this is the first half of a 2-parter. Next week, we're going to hear from the House 24 candidates, and we'll have the same ground rules, same set of procedures as Ken Moore, the Democrat, and Ron Noble, the Republican. This is an open seat. It was held by Jim Widener, who chose not to seek re-election after 4 terms this time. So both of these are considered competitive, very competitive races, and it's one of our interests in hosting them is for that reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming today. I'm going to close the meeting by saying that Kiwanis is a global organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world one child and one community at a time. Have a great afternoon.
Okay, so who are you going to vote for? AM 1260 KLYC. So if you want to listen to this again, we have a podcast that's going to be available on our KLYC On Demand for audio only. And then we also have the video that we've been streaming live, and that'll be up on our Facebook page, YouTube page. We also have on our website, klYC.us, we'll put up a link tab there called Election Forums. And if you want to go specifically to an area to just listen to the candidates and see what their positions are, we'll have that up sometime very soon. And this candidates forum will be one of those. And next week will be the Ron Noble Ken Moore candidate forum here a week from today at the Mac Grand Ballroom, and we'll have that again with live streaming video and live broadcast on KLYC. We are doing a lot of live streaming video wherever possible, whenever we have the time to set up the gear, and it's an event we want to cover. We want to bring you the video, and that's something we're going to be doing and committed to here at KLYC going into the future as we go into the future of media. It looks a lot different than it did in the past. Again, a note, we're keeping an eye on the storm. 2 to 10 p.m. this afternoon, we're expecting winds possibly up to 50 miles per hour. Saturday, a possibility of more gusty winds and more rain. We've already had more than an inch of rain. Since, as of about 11 this morning, we've had about 1 1/10 inches in the McMinnville forecast, or the McMinnville area, what's actually fallen on the ground. So we'll keep an eye on that storm for you and then let you know as the conditions change. Depend on us. AM 1260 KLYC. Let's get back to the music. I'm in you, Peter Frampton. By the way, one other thing before we do that. We hopefully will have the McMinnville football game tonight. We will have that unless it gets called from by weather. After that, we'll have the Wolfman Jack Show and When Radio Was. Just a program note. Here's Peter Frampton. I'm in you on the cruise.